welcome to another episode of Frame and Reference. I'm your host, Kenny McMillan, and today we're talking with Joey Fameli, the DP and content producer over on Adam Savage's Tested YouTube channel. It's a fantastic channel, both educational and entertaining, and oftentimes meditative. You'll just have to check it out to see for yourself. Joey's actually a personal friend of mine, so this is kind of two guys just kind of catching up after a few months of not talking. But I do try to keep it on the rails as much as possible. So plenty of tech talk. Tested is a channel in which they test stuff, as well as watching the one-day builds and stuff that Adam does. But plenty of gear talk, as well as sort of learning about Joey and talking about quote unquote indie production on the whole. Bunch of great stuff in this one. So hopefully you'll have as much fun listening to it as Joey and I had doing it. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Joey Fameli. How did you get started, like as a creative? Like, where did your visual sort of influences come from? Like, were you always into film, or did you start some other way, or how'd that get going?
Yeah. How did I get started? So I was always creative as like a kid. I think I'm at an age where the old like VHS camcorder was very popular. I don't know if you remember those like big old, I don't even know if it was VHS, but it's essentially like a lot of parents had these camcorders. And so me and my cousin used to make just a bunch of little animations, little short films. But it kind of ended there for a long time. I got really into comic books at that time. This is the 90s. This is like the heyday of, the Jim Lee, X-Men, the whole Marvel universe I was super into. And so that was my path for a long time. I was really aiming to be in the comic book world, whether that be like, not really, maybe a writer, but I was really into like framing up stuff, drawing, doing my own panels, doing my own essentially my own narratives in the comic book form. And so I was going for that for a long time. As I kind of got out of high school, I was doing a bunch of stuff in high school. It's kind of all over the place. I was in a band playing music. I thought that was going to be a path. I was doing, starting to get a little bit into photography. Not very good at it. I didn't. It was more the technical stuff. It was still film. I just didn't have the patience for that at the time. Doing a lot of skateboarding, and so didn't really have a clear idea of what I was doing out of high school, except for just reading comic books, watching a lot of movies. And it wasn't until I went off to, I was going to like a junior college, and I went off to do a semester abroad in Florence, Italy. And it was wild. Like I was all of a sudden pulled out of my, I lived in a suburban hometown in north of San Francisco. And so there wasn't a whole, my world was very small. The townies I was around, everything felt very insular. And so getting out into the world, especially going to someplace like Florence was huge and sort of mind altering. I was going for just general classes. I was taking like a full-time load of credits, but everything was sort of pointed towards art history, and especially like the Renaissance art history. We'd spend class time going to museums and checking out Michelangelo, Leonardo, all the big Renaissance heavy hitters. And so coming out of there, I sort of just reevaluated myself. Like I was really into art. I still didn't know exactly what I wanted to do, but I thought I needed to get out of the town I was in, and ended up moving down to Los Angeles early on. And I was still doing a lot of drawing, still thinking about Marvel, still thinking about comic books. But then I also started thinking, thinking about my love of movies at the time, and really how I love to take something from the start to the finish of some of these things, especially like when it came to drawing. It was like coming up with an idea, characters, and then writing out something, and then drawing those things out. And then like sometimes I would even scan these things into a scanner. I was using like After Effects and Adobe, and I was making animations and little like almost like pop-up book or flip book style animations. And that sort of led to me just having this moment of realization where like, I think movies is kind of where like movies is where it's at. Like film, like the music side of me loves it. I love sound design, love scoring things or like thinking about composers and putting this art to eventually all the art that I was doing became like storyboards for that stuff. So it sort of just kind of hit me like all at the same time of like, yeah, I think all of this artistic urges I have can be funneled into this thing of film. And so I started doing a lot of PA work, started doing just interning at that time. Like now we're in like the early 2000s and like filmmaking was becoming kind of cool. Like I remember like Project Greenlight, On the Lot, like those big shows. MySpace had like a filmmaker, mini DV was a thing, right? So MySpace became like a place where young filmmakers were shooting mini DV short films. And this is
I was one of them.
Were you? Yeah.
Yeah.
I got the Canon XHA1 mini DV camera.
That's nicer than mine. I have an XL2. I still have my XL2.
The XL2. I was trying to think of which camera was it, because there was that MySpace guy. I remember him always pose on those things. I'm like, what? Like, yeah, there's that XL. It had interchangeable lenses, and like no cameras at that time really had that. And I probably wouldn't even know at that time. I wouldn't know what to do with a interchangeable lens camera. Like I was riding that zoom on the XLH1 and sort of figuring out what shots I liked, but again, like I wasn't really learning lensing. I wasn't learning focal lengths. I was just sort of, that was my training ground in terms of knowing visually what I wanted. And from there, just made a ton of short films with my friends, went to college, didn't go to college for film. I went actually for finance.
Probably a better move at this point.
Yeah. It was, I was being in Los Angeles and working on like music videos as a production assistant. Everybody I was around was coming out of $100,000 debt in film school. And here I am at the exact same, place as them, learning on the job, where I think you do a big amount of learning. And so that was my decider against film school, was like, I can do this like self-sufficient. Like I can seek out these people, seek out these productions and work on the job and learn it that way. And then go to school for finance and sort of get that safety degree. At that time, again, we're still in the mid 2000s. So like college was really pressed on everyone as being like, you need to get a degree. You need to get a college degree if you want to do anything. And so that was my safety. And then I just haunted the film department and made a lot of good friends, some of whom I'm still making shorts with. John Finger is one of the guys he's getting really into like LED screen volume stuff. And, we still play around.
I want to get into that so bad.
I have some. I do VR production now, and so I have like Steam trackers. So I'm gonna start messing into it as soon as I get down and visit him. But yeah, just haunted the film club, made a bunch of short films with those guys, and then after getting out of college, I sort of entered into the job hunting phase of my career, where I was back up north. I'm back in the San Francisco Bay Area. Not a whole lot of film stuff up there, and so I was just working part-time jobs and doing a lot of music video work. At this point, I was now competent enough to like grab a camera and do stuff, and so I was either doing camera operator or like assistant camera on some music video scene up in the North Bay, and that's when I met who had become sort of one of my mentors at that time, Mike Sloat, who directs a lot of metal music videos and like some early 90s punk stuff like NoFX and I can blank on a bunch of other names of the Bay Area punk scene, but he was doing a bunch of things up here. And so I ended up just working with him a ton. And then he got this opportunity to go on tour with Machine Head, which is a big metal band. And they were going on this Metallica, on tour with Metallica, and he couldn't do it. And so he threw the job to me, which, being like a 24-year-old kid with very little experience at that time, I mean, I was doing stuff under the tutelage of people mostly, but he threw me into the deep end with that. And I ended up going through the East Coast leg of the Metallica tour as sort of a behind-the-scenes documentary filmmaker with the band, sort of documenting the life and creating sort of something out of all this footage that they were getting from the East Coast and Europe.
Well, Metallica famously Bay Area band.
Yeah. They're up here. They were flying home every few days. So I was living on a tour bus going through the East Coast, and they would just, we're in the East Coast. They would just fly back every few days, hang out in the Bay Area with their family. It was very interesting because you think of like metal bands and being on tour. You think like Almost Famous, right? The movie Almost Famous, where
Right.
like you're just engulfed in these like this wild time, but like everyone there was kind of like they're family men. They just played their music, practiced, went home. Like it was very chill. It was cool. It also humanized humanized them for me, and I think that sort of thing kind of helped me work with actors and work with named talent later on. And,
Sure.
and like just not knowing how to talk to them, not how to not condescend, how to.
Not freak out or that you're talking to, Johnny
Yeah.
Depp or whoever.
And I've really starting to learn like the folks who are in those positions like really appreciate when you don't can appreciate a person who can hold their shit together when they're around them.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was coming back from that tour. I had all this footage. I sent the footage away, but I made copies of it and I cut it into like a little, it's like a little demo reel. This was the only thing I had that I shot personally. I guess I could have been labeled the DP of that. That also wasn't narrative short film. I had so much narrative, well, not so much, but I had a handful of narrative short film stuff. But it was all with the friends in the college. Like it didn't look great. It wouldn't have got me jobs. But this was something I saw that could get me a job doing something. And once I cut that together, I sent that off to some folks, and through a loose connection with somebody else, ended up getting an interview with a company called Whiskey Media in the Bay Area.
Yep.
Now we're like we're like 2009, 2010, where digital was sort of a big thing. Like YouTube has been out for a few years, and there was tons of companies that were putting together small teams and doing these like digital productions.
Well, and that's right when the I've talked about this a few times, but that's right when the 5D came out. We started to be able to shoot on SD cards instead of mini DV. So
Man. Yeah, I missed that. I missed that whole 5D thing. So I was coming from mini DV, jumped into Whiskey Media, who were using the DVX 100s. I
Yep.
believe that's what it was. Yeah, with the P2 cars. They were using like large.
no,
expensive-
that was the HVX 200.
Okay.
The DVX 100 was the Panasonic version of the XL2, except it didn't have.
Right.
In film school, it was always, are you going to shoot DVX 100 or XL2? And most film schools had the DVX. I think they were cheaper.
That's funny. That's like the Aryan red debate just back in the consumer.
Oh, 100%. Dude, I remember when the red one came out in like 08 or 09, something like that. And everyone suddenly thought, because it was affordable, whatever it was at the time, 30 grand, 40 grand, something like that. And we were like, man, if we could rent that, we're going to be real filmmakers today.
Man. Yeah. I don't know if you remember these. When I was using that camera on the Machine Head tour, it was rigged out with, I think it was Red Rock that was making them, but it was like a bunch of adapters and mirrors locked onto the end of that camera to make it look cinematic.
The Red Rock, Lettuce, and PNS Technic were the three companies that were doing that. And you lost like what, 2 stops of light, 4 stops of light, some nonsense.
And then what was it doing? Was it just, I can't remember, was it just increasing the sensor size, the theoretical sensor size to give you a...
It was, so it was attaching a photo lens to the front, but then also it was, I believe there were some optical elements that were, it was like a speed booster almost, except there was no speed to be boosted.
Right, it was speed.
Yeah, and it was focusing the output of the lens onto a piece of ground glass. And I remember the thing that PNS Technic did that was revolutionary was all the ground glass in like the Red Rock or the Lettuce version. I could be confusing who did what, but one of these companies had a motor in it which spun the ground glass. So because all these other adapters, it had a still piece of ground glass, so you would get this grain, but it wouldn't move. So it was like, it looked like you were filming. It looked like what you were doing, which was filming a projection.
Yeah.
So one of the companies, so one of the companies spun the ground glass, so the grain would move.
That's wild. Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Oh man. Yeah.
But then you'd get the footage in upside down, which was a pain in the ass. So then somebody had the mirrored version, which flipped it for you. And
I mean, it's silly now to think of, but it was interesting, fun times. It was a little bit of like emerging tech, a little bit of, it was like filmmaking, like camera operation and filmmaking was a little bit of democratized. It was very new to everybody, and so it was.
Well, the thing,
fun with that stuff.
the thing that we've talked about a couple times, because there's a few guys who like kind of all came up that I've interviewed recently who all came up in that sort of same time. And we all kind of reminisce about how like when we got 24p, when we were able to shoot to SD cards, you know, all that kind of interchangeable lenses, all that kind of stuff felt, or even the adapters felt like exciting and new. And that was like all we needed, right? We were just like, if only we had like 24p or whatever, or if only we didn't have to shoot to these tapes and do login capture. And now it's like you hear like, oh, this one does 8K, and you're like, oh fuck, who cares? Like that's not exciting to me. Like that's, you know, getting that giant adapter thing was exciting, you know?
Yeah, I'm at a point now where I'm like, oh, I want that dolly. So if I want to put this thing on a Technograph. The weird things I get excited about now are like have nothing to do with the camera. It's just it's more just like, ooh, run that. That's a long dolly track. I like this.
Yeah, or like do the Deacons thing of just getting like a dolly track with the remote head, like the Libra head, you know, so you can just operate it with the wheels.
I was just doing some, but I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I was just editing some behind the scenes stuff or something, and I was just all the different heads and dollies that are available now. I'm like, oh wow, like that's getting to watch how simple yet like intimidating some of this stuff can look is I don't know, it's a lot of fun watching that behind the scenes content.
Dude, I remember, it's funny, man, you're like unlocking all these. I remember one memory you unlocked for me was I remember back in elementary school or junior high, we would do flip books with PowerPoint.
Oh,
so we would do stick figures. It was usually like a skateboarding stick. We would have like a stick figure like skateboarding and hitting like obstacles and stuff, but you would just hold the right button and it would fly through, and we would animate that way.
You can almost it's almost like a little frame. Yeah,
it was laborious. But the thing that you reminded me of is I remember my freshman year of college, my buddy Smalls, what's his real name? David Burchell. He had, you know, we all brought something to our film school. So I had the XL2. You know, some other people had maybe like some connections to things, but you know, a nice house somewhere in the area. But Smalls brought he had a jib. He had a jib arm. Oh. So you better believe that first year there was just jib shots in everything. No one had a jib in 2008.
Yeah, that's like the FS700 when we got that, it was like all of a sudden everything was slow mo. Everything was 120 frames a second.
Oh, dude! Speaking of, like, I just did kind of a while, maybe a few months ago. I did like a sort of retrospective review of the XL2 because I was able to plug it into my recorder.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it occurred to me like, wow, this thing came out in like 2007, and it had interchangeable lenses with an EF. They had an EF adapter that was this big, so you could have used stills lenses on the thing. You know, interchangeable lenses. Built-in NDs, you know, you could selectable white balance, 24p in 2007, and then like cameras started to come out that didn't have all that shit.
Yeah, that's
so like the FS700 having 120, and then now it's like hard to get.
Right, and I don't know. Like I know with the I use the GH5 quite a bit, and one of the reasons I liked that camera at that time was like. The smaller sensor meant like the processing power wasn't as intensive. And so like they were able to like play with things more advanced than, you know, at that time, like, you know, the optical image stabilization, like the frame rates you can get on that. Like you couldn't really get that with A7s yet.
Right.
So I wonder if that has something to do.
I mean, definitely. I mean, like when I've talked to some people at Canon about the C500 and like just very questions I had, a lot of time the answer was, well, it's a big ass sensor and it's hard to process all that information at once.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. It's, I can't imagine. I'd love to like do like go into a factory at some point and break down what is going on. Cause digital sensors still baffle me.
Yeah, it's I'm actually going to do something with Strange. I'm going to start working with Strange again, making more content for him. But like one thing that we want to do is sit down and create the perfect cinema camera, like borrow all of the parts that we like from various cameras that we like and see what that looks like.
Yeah. Because
I can't imagine, like, most of there's like the Venn diagram of all these cameras that we like is pretty collapsed in on itself. It's always like one thing I like about Red is like there's a function that was demoed for me on the Gemini when that first came out, and that was you could push a button, and in the metadata it would create a marker. And I was like, I would love that if like on my camera, if there was like something I wanted to remember, like, ooh, that's a good thing.
Right.
Just push a little button and it creates a metadata marker. I like metadata is the one thing I think like Blackmagic does really well, and Red does really well. And I think more metadata features, more digital slating, more
Right. I wonder
behind
if
the
gets,
scenes stuff.
I wonder if it gets trickier with like HVEC or like H.264 codecs, you know, because some of the cameras, like I feel like that'd be an easier thing when you're shooting out to ProRes or shooting out to some kind of RAW format. Like you can pass along that data. I mean, it shouldn't be that difficult. Who knows? I don't know.
But I mean, all these cameras have some version of RAW at this point, you know. I mean, maybe like Canon's RAW Lite, I think, is less raw and more half processed footage. You know, it's 12-bit. It's not like raw. And but you can still select, you know, your ISO and your white balance and all that stuff. So I think with your Blackmagic or your Red RAWs, those are far more raw, like literal raw data. And I think you can probably stuff a lot more stuff in there.
Yeah. Yeah. Now we're getting to a point. Some of the cameras we have in house. Well, I guess I should finish. So what I do now?
Yeah. Sorry.
It's a good tangent. So what I do now. Going back from Whiskey Media, when I got that job, I ended up working with a small team, teaming up with Adam Savage, who was the MythBusters host, one of the MythBusters hosts, that television show, and he has a digital brand now, which is predominantly platformed on YouTube, called Adam Savage's Tested. And so I been working with him since 2012. Pretty small team. It's like it's always been sort of 4 to 5 of us. I think we just got our 5th head in. So I work with him and another host / producer, Norman Chan. And my current role is now sort of, I kind of do a lot of stuff. I wear a lot of hats. My role is director of production, but I work on a lot of special projects, campaign stuff when I'm not shooting and editing sort of our normal everyday content. We do a lot of iPhone stuff now, being that when the pandemic hit, we couldn't all get together. So we shoot a lot on iPhones. Now we're getting back into cameras again. We just got the Sony FX6.
That's a great camera.
Yeah, I totally dig it. I actually brought it home this weekend to really play around with it a lot more. But we went from the FS5, FS7 to this one, and then we scale up because one of my roles is to scale up and down as we need. And so if we have a shoot that needs more people, more crew, then I will sort of come in and manage that, and then rent cameras. We just shot with the C500 Mark II, and then the Atlas anamorphic lenses. And before that, like we've used Alexas very rarely.
I remember, I think you and I were talking when you were thinking about buying the FX6. You were kind of waffling between that and was it like a C300 or a C70?
Yeah, I think it was this. Oh, good question. Yeah, it might have been the C300 Mark II. That's what you shot with before the 500, right?
No, I shot with a C100 Mark II.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
Which I still think is a great camera, but now that the C70's out, it's kind of like it's better in almost every way, you know.
Yeah,
now,
I think
it's
you
also got
recommended the
RAW
C70,
too.
and I was looking at that pretty. Yeah.
But
We
it's
ended up blending the FX6.
so 2 things. One, I don't know if you saw, but the C70 is getting RAW in March.
Really?
Yeah, so now it's a mini C300. Like unless you need like SDI and a few of the other special features that the C300 has, you know, the recording media difference and all that kind of thing. Yeah. C70 is really attractive. But I wanted to ask, what made you decide, if you were looking at a C300 Mark II, I could definitely see the difference. But what made you decide on the FX6?
FX6 was a combination of we have been a Sony house for a little while now with the FS5, FS7,
Sure.
and we have so much. I mean, this is this might sound petty, but like we have all the batteries, we have everything.
Yeah. That's a huge consideration.
Yeah, it was just
being in that
cheaper
workflow.
to just grab that. You know, we have Canon glass. I got a mount that can just easily transfer everything over. I mean, not that we couldn't use that with the Canon, but like we just kind of knew the FS5, FS7 so well. We thought it would be an easier transition, especially since we've sort of become, for a long time, it was just me and maybe one other person doing all the production stuff. in house, but it's sort of changed a little bit where everyone kind of touches the gear and touches the editing systems. And so I've worked with them on the Sony FS5 for so long that like, I thought it'd be easier just to get that camera in and so that everybody can use it and yeah, we can kind of share that knowledge.
Yeah.
It's also, yeah, it looks nice. It looks, I mean, I've always had issues with some of the color and magentas on the FS5, but this one looks a lot better in my opinion.
You know what's funny is I just saw someone had done a comparison between the FX3, which is not a fucking cinema camera. People need to stop. FX6, FX9, and Venice. And the FX6 looks better than the 9, in my opinion.
Really?
I'm really disappointed in that FX9. Like I did a comparison of it versus the C500, the Venice, and the Alexa LF. And like at that level, like they all look great. But the 9 seemed to have like kind of a problem with like depth of color, the best way I can explain it. It still had that greenness that you kind of used to see with Sony. But the 6 and 3, that's all gone with like the new Cinetone processing and all that stuff. Like it just it looks way better.
That's what we've been shooting in is that. And I really want to get my hands on a Venice and just shoot with both and see how I can match them together. And like if they do match okay.
They match okay. They honestly do. Yeah. The Venice, obviously, you're going to see a lot more spatial resolution and a lot more. The image cadence is a little more. I hate saying it, but cinematic. But
quote unquote cinematic.
Yeah. But they've done a great job, kind of making those all work similarly.
Yeah, from what I've seen of the Venice, it looks. I really like the image coming out of it. I love it's low light. I think there was that movie. Kate was just shot on it. If you've seen that Netflix movie, Kate, pretty wild, like John Wick style movie, but with
oh really?
What's her name from Scott Pilgrim? Blanking on names today, but yeah, we was all shot in Venice.
The girl in the band,
the girl that plays Ramona
not
Flowers.
Captain Marvel.
No, not Brie Larson.
Ramona Flowers. Oh, she. Damn it! Yeah, I know who you're talking about though. Yeah.
Yeah, she's Mary Elizabeth Winstead.
There you
go. Yeah, totally worth seeing. That's one of my favorite movies the last couple of years. Kate. But yeah, all shot with the Venice. But I don't know if you've had this issue when thinking about investing in cameras. Is I want it to be an investment, and I want it to be something that will help me get work, if that makes sense. But I feel like you need to have the red or the Arri name to get most people to.
You know what? I would say that in 50 episodes, which is giving away when we record this, because right now the last one that just came out was 40. But a huge number of these projects are shot on Venice.
Really?
Huge number. It's right now like it's either Venice or RELF, but a lot of Venice. A lot of TV shows are shot on Venice. Plenty of films. I think a lot of movie like older, I shouldn't say older, but like more traditional DPs probably gravitate to the LF. But I was actually shocked over the past year and a half of how many projects are shot on Venice.
Oh, that's good to hear. Yeah, I'd like to see somebody else kind of enter the conversation a little bit more seriously when it comes to that stuff. Yeah, the Alexa is just so simple to use. I love using that one. That's
literally why they made it that way. I was just speaking to an older gentleman who said like that was what got him into the Alexa. He was a staunch film guy. And when he was using, he was saying like the Panavision Genesis or the Viper or anything like that, it was just huge and complicated and wires and all this crap. And then Ari came out with the Alexa and he just went, oh, there's a button to record, there's a button for white balance, and that's pretty much it. That's all I need. Thank God.
Giant record button, just hit that.
Yeah.
We shot in New Zealand, and it was with the Weta and Peter Jackson team, and I was prepping for the day, and he allowed me to go. This was 2016. He let me go into his studio and just basically pick out the gear and the lights, and we ended up taking some. They're a red house. They had they shot all the Hobbit on red, but I was looking at the red 3D rig that they had, and it was essentially one red and then another red shooting down into a mirror, and I'm just staring at this thing thinking about how they shot the Hobbit taking this giant, massive thing around. I'm like, oh, that is. There's a lot of technical aspects of cameras I love. This is not one of them. I want something simple and easy to carry, easy to use.
Yeah, like that monster rig from The Irishman.
Right.
Have you seen photos of that thing where it's like
Yeah.
4 cameras mounted to the same unit?
And it was all for the de-aging, right? I mean, that's a predominant.
Yeah, they were witness cameras. They were using Alexas as witness cameras. So that footage never got used.
Yeah.
I think one of them, they had a infrared, like they had changed the filter to like infrared, or the sensor to like infrared, so that they could get like depth and whatever.
There's a lot of data for that CG team.
Yeah.
That's cool.
But yeah, those rigs were enormous. What I was going to say earlier was Dan Stoloff, who shot The Boys, was saying how The Boys is shot on Venice. But something fascinating he told me, which it gave me like a boost of confidence, was we were just sitting there talking, and he was like, one thing that's kind of nice, because I asked him if he used the Rialto extension, which I've learned since apparently is kind of a pain in the ass. It's a cool idea, and apparently it works great. But I had read some things on some forums about people who have to rig that thing up and like put it, not the DPs, but like everyone around it.
Right.
And they're just like, Rialto. But he was saying that the studio or whoever didn't really want to spring for that extension. So he was like, yeah, sometimes I'll just grab my Fuji X-T3, put it where we couldn't fit the camera. And there's probably 1 or 2 shots in every episode of The Boys that shot on the X-T3. And I was like, what? Wow. I grabbed mine. I was like, this thing. And he goes, yeah, I love that thing. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Like,
that's too funny. That's a very like anamorphic, high contrast show. Like that's cool that they're able to.
Well, and I use the X-T3 since that conversation. I've used it as the B cam to my C500. And when you get the footage into Resolve, it does not look the same at all. Right. But it colors to match very easily.
Okay.
And so, yeah, he said he just would throw a PL mount on it, and then they recorded out to a recorder so they could get
like a Ninja or something.
10-bit. Yeah.
That was the biggest thing. There was a period of time where we were shooting both the C100 and the Sony FS7 or FS5, and we did this big gig with multiple cameras. It was like those two and a bunch of drones and GoPros, Blackmagic Micro. I remember the Micro cinema camera.
Yeah, this guy? The little, yeah.
Yeah, we got introduced to that on Mythbusters. They replaced their GoPros with those eventually, because at that time you can just color it to match their whatever they were using at the time. But trying to go from Canon to Sony in DaVinci, it's like I'm taking curves and I'm like adjusting hues to match. I'm like, this is ridiculous. Like,
yeah. You know what I did honestly is I just did set my girlfriend up with some color charts and stuff. And I've done this, like, this is how I made all my like picture. Well, maybe not the picture profile so much, but like I've done this a lot, but I did it with mine is I just put the 2 cameras together and created a LUT that I drop onto the X-T3 footage to match the C500, cause that way I only have to do it once. Yeah. And it's technically accurate. It's not like a look. It's just like technically moving the curves around and adjusting, the color chart. And that gets me 85, 90% of the way there every time.
Wow. Okay.
And it's like you just put a lot of work in at first, and then you don't need to think about it anymore.
So I was just at the shop yesterday, and Adam just finished rebuilding an Arriflex camera. Like,
oh, cool!
Like he got all the motors working, and so we had it open, and he's just showing me how it shoots the film down and like everything. We're talking about putting some film in and shooting, and he showed me the tools. I have a light meter and color meter and stuff like that, but I've never actually put my hands on film. I've always been a digital. And he's showing me some. Yeah, we're so excited to look at that. But he was showing me some tools that I didn't even consider, and one of them was like an eyepiece. That I have to look at it more, but the way he explained it to me was it was an eyepiece that DPs use when they were shooting film that would sort of, I don't know how to explain it. I guess it would just bring the dynamic range of the world around you into something that's a little bit closer to how a film would see. And so it's just a tiny little, like almost like a monocle. And he's just,
you know what that is it was used for, what is it called? Gaffer's glass. And
Gaffer's glass. Okay.
It was blue, I think.
Yeah.
Like
it had a blue, dark, like ND or something.
So what that was actually used for was, I didn't think about it like as a dynamic range So it's, you know what it is more like is it's like a welding helmet. So what they would do is it would be to check HMIs or like carbon arc lights, so the gaffer could look into the light and not fucking blind himself.
No. Wow. Okay. So it's actually they're just there to dim it, just like an ND or something.
So you could literally look at like the carbon arc or the HMI or whatever and see what's going on in there and make sure that it's like correct.
Okay, I gotta let him know. Yeah, because he's giving me these tools. I'm like, I've never touched these before. Trying to explain it to me, but
he to be fair, that's the on the box description of what a gaffer's glass is. For all, like, I never. It's interesting to think of it as like a dynamic range compression or something like that, but that's what a gaffer's glass is. He might have shown you something else as well. I could be
maybe
completely off the mark, but if you Google gaffer's glass, I think that's what you're thinking of.
Oh.
Because that would be a cool product. Because like that film straight up, you have like 3 stops up and down, and that is it.
Well, so yeah, that was gonna be I guess that's where I started thinking about it, was because I've been shooting a lot of VR with Oculus, and so everything is so new when it comes to immersive 3D 180 VR video that it's really tricky as a camera operator or cinematographer to bring that stuff and light it correctly, and also get the right monitoring tools. So like we shot, I think 3 or 4 seasons, about 8 episodes each. And so much of it is putting this camera with these 2 large lenses. We're getting a new Canon for this year's project, but it's essentially 2 giant fish eyes.
The double lens that the
exactly,
R5?
yeah. It looks like it looks like Johnny 5 Alive or something, like a robot, a short circuit robot. But we don't have great monitoring tools yet. I mean, you can kind of see the image. You can sort of get your exposure. I still meter it. So I'll bring out a light meter and I'll know what exposure looks great. Exactly. Yeah. But the problem I'm having is when we shoot for 16:9 or whatever frame, we sort of play with contrast and move things around, but like none of that works in this context. Like when I'm looking at the image on the viewfinder and I see, oh yeah, the subject's lit and everything else kind of falls off. There's I have some lights there that add a little bit of, bring back some levels. But when you put on the headset, the world completely changes because you want to give the user the experience of standing there in the room, but the cameras don't have the ability to see levels like we do. Like they don't have as good of dynamic range as our eyeballs, right? And so I can light someone and make it look good on screen, but then you put the headset on and all of a sudden they look like they're in a cave or something because the levels drop off so dramatically on certain parts of the image that like you sort of lose the immersion. So I was looking at that tool. I'm like, God, it would be so good to have something like that, just like a monocle where I can look at the world in the way that the VR cameras are going to see it. Because right now I'm walking around to every part of the room with a light meter, adjusting lights to make corners pop just a little bit, just to bring those levels up so that it feels real, while at the same time looking at the camera at the viewfinder and seeing something that's a little more washed out. And it's super difficult right now.
You are kind of getting the OG film experience then, just like, I don't know what this is going to look like until we're in the grade,
Oh yeah. Yeah. And that's what they really need. They need like a live view headset, and I'm sure it'll come out at some point, but like it's, you have to like take those images. You're getting 2 separate images. You have to take that stuff together and like stitch it together, and like, especially with 3D, you have to like stitch it correctly so that those images give you the correct 3D experience, so that the person standing 3 feet ahead of you looks like they're 3 feet ahead of you and it's not focused all weird. So yeah, it's very new emerging technology, but also like you said, like there's a little bit of some old school filmmaking stuff. But also I have as a shooter, I have to like almost forget a lot of the things. Like I want to do, a weird angle. I want to go Dutch, but like, no, you have to like stay at the eye level of the person. Like you're basically trying to simulate a person standing there, which is, it's not what you do as a cinematographer. You have your artistic manipulation that you sort of add to the image of the story, and you kind of can't do that here.
Are you, so you said you never worked with film before?
I've never worked
with photography.
Yeah, photography, and that was it. And like not film cameras. The closest I got was no.
Is Adam going to let you like take the Ariflex for a spin and shoot something?
Yeah, we're going to get some film. I think he has a little bit more to do, a little more work to do. He just built some, or he refurbished and like built some old school sticks for it. It has like the area, like the ball head on those things. So we got some
He
wooden
would
sticks
make the wooden sticks. Yeah.
yeah. And it looks straight up like I'm looking at it, I'm like, this looks out of time. Like it's great. It's not just an area flex on a modern, Satchel tripod. It's like, it looks like something from that era. And yeah, it's loud as hell. So we're probably going to do something MOS or just shoot some tests, but yeah, it should be fun.
Well, you said you like doing the like Foley and stuff like that. That could be a good really like a really good Foley test, or like just doing everything in post.
Yeah,
hone that skill.
That is but then also just I wouldn't even know. I mean, I know there's a couple companies I used to live by down in Los Angeles that do like film processing, but yeah, that's going to be nerve-wracking to send off stuff as a first-time film shooter and having that stuff processed.
Definitely. I mean, we were just talking about this in the last podcast. Rip off a few tests, like a few 100-foot rolls of just testing. Like what they had us do at NIFO was get in a lighting situation that you're expecting, and you just have a whatever piece of paper, something like that, and something to do that'll help is at the head of every roll shoot a gray card, and if you're shooting color, then a color chart. Just like have the person standing there ready, and then start rolling until it speeds up and everything and like hits there, and that gives the I'm sure the technology's there where they don't need this anymore, but that just really helps the processor know what's supposed to look correct.
Right. Okay.
If you've got the gray card and the color chart there for them. But few test rolls. What we would do is we would, whatever stock we were given, we would set that up at the gray card and a person in the lighting situation we did, and we would just write like key, shoot a few seconds at key, shoot a few seconds overexposed by a stop, underexposed by a stop, blah, 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 and then get the whole thing back. And then you go, all right, so in this situation that we're in, I know that one stop over looks really good on skin. That's where we should be shooting this, or two stops under, whatever looks best to you.
And this all changes dramatically, I'm assuming, with different stocks, different style of stocks.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, now today you've got one option, and that's 5219.
Okay.
Is it 35 or is it 16 mil?
16.
Okay, so whatever, 7219. Yeah, Kodak, Fuji doesn't even make motion picture stock anymore.
Really? So you can't buy short ends, like everything, all that infrastructure is.
They might exist, but
right.
yeah, I don't. They would potentially be expired or something like that. At Film Tools, we just found a box of some exposed and some unexposed 35 reels.
Wow.
Just behind some stuff.
Hanging out. Jeez.
And because Moviola is the main company that does Film Tools and Pro Video Coalition. So we're assuming it was, Moviola is the editor, the giant editor, flatbed editor. So we were like, man, this must just be like someone, like it didn't have enough data on it for us to know what it's from. But I was like, dude, you need to get this processed, and then we need to take these other rolls and go shoot something.
Wow. For
like the Film Tools YouTube or something. But yeah, you're going to get 7219 for that, or black and white. Although Kodak did just start, black and white could be really cool.
Yeah.
A little more forgiving in certain ways, especially with like color contrast.
Right. You just throw whatever colors. Yeah.
Yeah. You can use whatever light you want. But Kodak did just start making Ektachrome again.
Really?
That's what they shot all of Euphoria season 2 on.
I haven't seen Euphoria. I need to check it out.
No, I don't know about that. It's a bunch, dude. It's so weird. It's like a bunch of college age or older people playing high school students, just doing drugs and fucking each other every second. It's the
like
weirdest.
The 90s, right? All the high school kids are like played by like 35-year-olds.
Yeah, but yeah, Ektachrome. As far as I'm aware, Ektachrome is a slide film, so you've got like no dynamic range. You have to fucking nail it.
Yeah. There's no room for
I would maybe say stick to a negative film to start.
I might go something more forgiving.
Yeah. But I'm excited for that. That'll be fucking cool. I'd love to see what you do with that.
Yeah. I think at some point he wants to like modify it a little bit and add some modern things to it. Not sure what that is yet, but we'll see. It'll be untested.
Yeah, might have to get a blimp for it or something to bring the noise, the motor noise down.
That's what he was talking about. Yeah, he really wants to do something. Get one of those old school like sound compressors or whatever for the camera.
So how did you you kind of alluded to it with the Whiskey Media thing, but how did you get involved with Tested? Like, how did that first meeting go with Adam?
Right. So that was the result of a buyout. So when I got involved with Whiskey Media, there was five digital brands. So if you think of Whiskey Media as the parent company, there was like a movie website, a video game website, which is still around, Giant Bomb, and then like an anime, comic book, and Tested. I came on the same time that they were relaunching, or that they were launching Tested and Screened, the movie website. And so there was five of us in-house video producers. We were sort of what they would call like producer editors. And Predators, right? Yeah.
I hate that phrase.
It died for a little bit, and I'm starting to hear it pop up a little more now, the Predator phase. But I did all of Tested's launch videos. They came on, I shot all their launch videos with my boss at the time, Vinny Caravella, and got them going, then handed that project off to another video producer. I went over to the movie website and worked with those hosts full time, and then kind of as a sort of paratrooped in when needed for like the conventions for everything else. So we did a lot of conventions across all five brands, but like a lot of tech companies in the 2010s, it wasn't making a whole lot of money, and they ended up selling off a few of the brands. They ended up selling half to CBS. That's where like Giant Bomb went. That was where their home remained for a long time. And then Tested was sold to a company called Whale Rock, or at the time was Berman Braun, but it was a company down in West Hollywood who was getting into digital and getting into a ton of stuff. And so they were doing like Kardashians digital stuff, a bunch of like AOL stuff. And so they bought Tested as a way to bring a digital home to their clients, which were Adam and Jamie from Mythbusters. And so that meeting, I wasn't involved with that meeting. That was Norman and Will from Tested and the owners of Whiskey Media sitting down with Adam and find if that's a good fit. And I think the pitch to Adam and Jamie were, if you guys are the don't try this at home folks, like we are the try this at home folks. And so like
it was
like a good pitch.
Yeah.
So like that marriage started there, and we left Whiskey Media. We had all the gear with us. Part of the purchase was like, you take all of the stuff, like you and the brands come, the gear, the brands come with us, and then the other brands go somewhere else because CBS already had stuff. And so there's pictures of me in the studio, just me. It was just three of us. It was Norm, Will, and me. And here I am with 5 Panasonics. I have a TriCaster, like a $50,000 TriCaster, which is like a multi-cam mixing. Yeah.
TriCaster must be so pissed at the like Zoom revolution. There's so many inexpensive mixers now.
We're looking at our TriCaster. We still have it. I'm looking at it like, I think we missed the point of selling this, but I don't know. I'm going to try at some point.
Probably sell it to a studio. They're not going to use a Blackmagic
there's a lot of like, and churches use them a lot. Anyway, yeah. I had a ton of this stuff, and so I just sat there for like the next few months and built out a studio, and then we would jump over to Adam's shop and like shoot with him maybe like once or twice a week because Mythbusters was still going on, and so they were shooting Mythbusters. Adam would come over with us and shoot for a little bit, and then we do a bunch of original content. And slowly, as time went on, Adam's schedule freed up. Mythbusters eventually ended, and so he became much more of a full-time involvement. And now it's a pretty close collaboration in terms of like the day-to-day. So it went from 3 of us to like 5 or 6 of us, and then it was all part of a purchase and all part of a marriage there, and that we got involved with them.
Was Mythbusters like a big thing for you? Because you're slightly older than I think the demographic that like probably watches Tested, but
yeah, Mythbusters, I actually kind of I don't know if I was in the right age, the wrong age, or the wrong time, but I was coming out of high school in 2000, and I went off. Once I went abroad and did that, like I just had this sort of less consuming, super ambitious kind of track, and so that's when that show just started. So I kind of missed the whole aspect of that. I think if it came out while I was in high school, it would have been a big one for me, but I totally missed it. And so like when I came on board, like I've seen the show. I was very familiar with it, especially because it was a Bay Area show and there wasn't a whole lot of those. But yeah, I would see things in there, and like Adam would tell me stories, and I just kind of like, oh yeah, I don't know, I have to catch up. At some point, I'm going to sit down and watch a marathon.
It's got to be interesting for him to like go to the conventions and stuff and talk to people who have like a more intimate knowledge of his show than him. Because you know when you're a fan of anything, you probably know more than the people who made it because you've probably watched it a million times. Whereas if you made the thing, you did it once, maybe you've seen it a second time when it aired or whatever, and you're done.
You can like make polls from a specific episode and one specific thing. The wildest thing that I think came out of working with Adam or observing that the culture on the show is he would do, we would still do a lot of conventions. We're at Comic-Con like every year before COVID, and he would do a lot of speaking engagements there and conferences. And sometimes we'd shoot those, sometimes we'd just watch them. But I'd bring up a camera, go to the press booth, plug in an XLR, get audio, and just sit there and shoot. And I've shot, a dozen or so of his talks. And there's always a big Q&A portion. And being that the show started airing like around 2000 and went on to 2013, 14, 15, those folks are now older and getting jobs. And there is an insane amount of people who are like, I watched your show when I was younger, and like now I work for NASA. Or like I watched your show when I was younger, now I'm an engineer. Like, oh wow, like I didn't realize. I guess I'm now seeing and I'm sure it's a trip to him too, but seeing the effects of his show on people and how how important science communication and engineering communication is to sort of motivating younger folks to take these career paths that aren't, as sexy as some other things that are in the media. So it's really cool. It's been a benefit of working with them.
For me, it was like one of those shows that, cause I'm only a few years younger than you, but like, it was one of those shows that was always on. It was just always there, so like when it ended, I was like, wait, are you allowed to do that? Like, I thought like it was always there. I thought that was just something that we always had, was just these two guys blowing shit up and teaching us things. It's like, it felt like Sesame Street, like if Sesame Street ended, we'd all be like, excuse you? Like,
like that doesn't happen. Like,
you're not allowed to do that. Actually, you reminded me of a question I wanted to ask you is when you went to Italy and you did your semester, one thing we've been talking a lot about on this podcast recently has been a lot of these older DPs or more traditional DPs started as painters. And I'm wondering if spending the time in those museums or anything like that, studying art, what that might have taught you about art yourself. Because you can get lost in a painting, not only thinking about the story of the painting, but also the process of painting it,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think the biggest thing I took away, or at least thinking about it in retrospect, is, and this might have to do with some of the movies that I kind of grew up on in the 80s, but like during the 90s and comic books and the shows then, I was just so used to being blown, just a high key image being blown at me, right? Detail and everything, lots of color. But being there, I think I really started to develop a taste for darkness. There's like, when you really start to look at some of the Renaissance paintings, you're like, oh, like there is a very specific way that they are drawing the eye to an area of this painting or certain areas of this painting, or, using like shapes and color, but also like most of that canvas is black or dark or just super dark. And the areas that they, a lot of, if not to put on my fedora, but like when people talk about like Caravaggio, like there's a lot of really high contrasty images because all they really had was like a window, right? That was just blown out as reference as they would be painting these things. But not being afraid of the darkness, I think really like stuck with me, and being able to, I don't know, produce something or understand that the power of what high contrast and dark images can do.
Yeah, it's as I've heard David Fincher say in like interviews or DVD commentary, it's what you don't do. It's what you don't show.
Yeah.
That's important.
And it's something
you can do anything.
Yeah. And especially now with like the cameras with the dynamic range where they're at, like, and what we do at Tested too is completely contradictory to that, where we're trying to show the details on certain things, right? It's not dramatic filming, but it's like we and I guess it's project specific, but like taking all of this information and being like, what do we really want out of this? Like we can like capture all of this and we can overlight this thing, but like, is that what we want to do here? And I don't know. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's something I still struggle with, but
One,
love.
well, and especially with these modern cameras, you end up, it's almost easier to think about darkness because the only way to shape contrast is to remove light. Whereas with film, you have to give it light to get
Yeah.
anything, you know, otherwise it's going to be black. With digital sensors, it's like right now, this is starting to look quite lit because the sun's kind of hiding from, you know, this is a north facing window. But if I were to turn off all the lights, you'd still see everything.
Right. Yeah.
know?
The sensitivity of cameras too has become much more fun to paint images on, because even going back to like the XL2s and like those video cameras still needed quite a bit of light, and so you're always kind of overlighting or blasting things just to get, you know, a properly exposed image. But like now being able to take now lights have also been super cheap. I shot an entire short film using like one dimmable Quasar 2 and a high sensitivity camera because I was able to like just give it the amount of light it needed, bring the sensitivity of the camera up, and we didn't have a whole lot of natural light blowing out the image. But like you can use much more subtle strokes to do the bigger things, I think, now, which is super exciting.
Dude, the number of DPs, talking about like all the DPs using the Venice, the number of DPs who have said like, yeah, I mean, we set like a big light outside so that we can pretend it's the sun, but inside it's like a lot of negative fill and Titan tubes.
Yeah.
Like every DP's got a set of Titan tubes somewhere.
If you would have told me 10 years ago how much I would love using negative fill, I'd be like, what? Really? A big thing of Duotine? Like,
Yeah. I've got like 2 bolts of it. I'll just put it up on one side of a room. Just
Yeah.
like that's shadow now. I actually heard, going back to your idea of like paring things down to like its basic form, you know, especially when you're showing detail and stuff. Someone had recently brought up a Gordon Willis quote, which was when you're shooting film, he found that this is kind of later in his life, but he was saying that a lot of modern film seems to be trying to add a lot, you know, trying to do more and more because more and more things are possible. And he was like, no, don't do that. You want to keep it simple. Pare everything down to its most basic
right.
thing to get the information across. Sometimes it's just one window light. Sometimes it's a look instead of a sentence. And then the other thing he said was it's simple, not simplistic. You
Yeah, I
don't
was
dumb
just gonna
it
say.
down.
It's like simple
not
doesn't mean lazy. Like, yeah.
Right. Well, you're not trying to dumb it down for the audience. You're trying to make it the most, the easiest to digest.
Digestible.
You're not making it stupid. You're making it specific, you know.
Yeah.
And I assume in Adam's fucking man cave, it's a little hard to simplify anything, you know, visually.
Oh, right. Yeah. We've been going through how to rig that place up to be usable, or to not fight us so hard. Because right now we're using a few LED fluorescents. He's got a few old school fluorescents that just give off this crazy green. He's got a skylight that we keep NDing, but it falls off. So we need to get up there. We need to black it out. I think at some point we're going to build out a grid, just like a truss or something above, and just start putting some area lights down. But it's tricky because what I've noticed shooting in so many shops is every time I sit there and like spend a pre-rig couple hours or a day making it look super like, oh, this is great, this looks fantastic, like super nice and like just creamy, like this, I love this. And then they come in and they want to start working and being filmed doing the work stuff, and like they can't see a thing. Or like it's difficult. They almost need, it's like they need to have large ambient area lights with little shadows. So even if I had everything, just the entire ambient exposure of the room brought way up, I couldn't really accent things with hard lights, because like if a shadow falls from their face on down to the table where they're trying to do soldering, it makes it unworkable. And so there's been a big trying to dance around folks who trying to figure out what the balance is on making a nice looking image in a workshop, but also having the workshop be usable for the person who's using it.
I wonder if you could like find a way to include the light that they need in your package. So like if they need a flashlight or a lamp or something, get one that has like a really nice TLCI, something that like you can use as a light, like a practical, basically just figure out a practical, you know?
That's where I think we're going, is like take all the fluorescents, put some actual like, you know, Asteras or something, Quasars in there. And then he's got a whole lot of he did build like some panels onto his table that are film lights and that I can adjust. So I kind of have everything sort of set at around the 4,500 range. And it's, you know, it's tricky. It's different. It's a different thing than unscripted and documentary stuff like that it can be much more challenging than being able to like have whatever you want in a studio and do whatever you want.
Sure. Yeah. Talk to me about kind of shooting that G4 piece and what you learned on that project.
Yeah, that was so one of our branded spots was we were working with G4, which is like a television network back in the 2010s or so. They went away for a little while and they were doing a big relaunch, and so they were working with us to promote that, and they sponsored 4 build videos and then 1 big finale piece. And so we gave them our sort of traditional tested one-day builds, which are like half hour to an hour long videos of Adam building something. And he was building essentially a spacesuit from scratch. He has a background in visual effects and working on props and stuff. And he's built space suit replicas, but this was his own design, his own creation. He was kind of a designer / builder and built these 2 spacesuits that we then shot in this sort of cinematic finale, this like 2-minute long piece that would reveal the G4 network kind of coming back. And the creative on it was essentially, it would be a bit of like a fashion piece. We would be shooting these things in a sci-fi environment, and then at the end give it an MTV style reveal, like an old CRT TV showing the G4 logo. And he wanted to include this like chess game, being that it was a video game company. He wanted to take this like old game element and involve it. And so the creative was basically shoot the suits in a sci-fi location, have a chessboard in it, CRT television, and then it was kind of handed to me as sort of dual director DP role to execute it. And so that was a situation where we did have to scale up. We did a lot of location scouting here in San Francisco. Couldn't find anything that really matched us, matched the scope of what we wanted to show, and ended up going down to Los Angeles to one of his old coworkers, Fawn Davis at Fonco Studios. And this is the benefit, I think, of Los Angeles set locations, is that there's a lot of places there that have, like, one building will have 5 different stages, right? You know, like one building will have the police precinct and like the doctor's office and the bar. And so his studio is set up to be a fabrication shop, but it also has 4 or 5 stages within it. He has like a modular spaceship that sort of has the interior all built out that you can sort of move around. And he's got a few, like a bar set, a few other sets. So we were able to knock out 3 or 4 locations in his one shop for the one day. And so we got a small crew together, hired them down south, got like an AC, a grip, a gaffer, the regular camera support team, and then also got set designers, rented the cameras, and then got Atlas anamorphic lenses to give it that, that sci-fi look. And then got the 2 suits that Adam made, got the hosts, and I essentially storyboarded it out. I think I have this posted somewhere, but I storyboarded it. I do this quite often where we didn't have a script, but we had boards. And then I took those boards and I bring them in, and this is kind of going back to what I used to do as a kid. I bring them into the computer and narrate through the boards as they're sort of like animatic almost.
That's actually really smart. Gets you good on timing.
I've done this a bunch, and like I'll and I think it's more for me to understand where like shots I don't need, or like you said, timing, figuring out the pacing of something. Because I'll add music, I'll add sound effects. Sometimes I'll like read the script. I'll read the parts of it. And so I did that for this, brought the boards, brought the animatic with us, kind of showed everybody, got the whole team on board for this idea. And then, did one pre-rig day of going through, getting all the set design stuff. We had to age everything quite a bit. The idea was it was like a dilapidated environment. And so we had a few folks there just aging things down, putting a lot of dust on things. One of my friends described my shooting style as dusty, and I think I'm like, what does that mean? What does that mean exactly? And I think it's just being someone that grew up on Carpenter films and like that style of shooting, like even the Dean Cundy cinematography. Like there is something I do like about having a dirty frame of just a lot of dust. So anyway, so we did a lot of dust. We had a lot of atmosphere. We brought hazers. did the whole thing and did one pre-rig day and then one shooting day, which was not enough. I think if anything I learned from this, it is that a good AD is awesome. We had an AD for our New Zealand shoot, and our day was efficient and like went through. We didn't have an AD for this, and we felt it. It was a rushed day. There were certain aspects of like the costumes that weren't working. Like they were just like they're kind of digging in, so we had to kind of change the way we shot for comfortability for the talent. But yeah, we ended up doing I think a good solid 2 minutes. We probably had to forfeit maybe 3 or 4 shots, and then I took that into post and did a light edit in color, and then we did like Foley work. Adam and I went through his shop and took the suit, made all the sound effects, and did just I think I have like 30 layers in Premiere of just sound design stuff happening, and then scored it and then pushed it out for G4. And like I said, it's about 2.5 minutes. I'm probably going to do like a 30-second cut down as a demo reel kind of thing. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think, working solo on so much stuff, this is, I think one of the things that is good to learn early on is like how to know exactly what kind of crew and support team you need, and then how to work with them to alleviate some of your workload, especially as like both the director DP combo. There's a lot I was juggling, and I think having a larger support crew would have made that day, even it costs a little bit more, I think it would have made that day much more efficient.
Yeah. Well, and especially if you are the director DP, like everyone's coming to you with
right,
their problems. Yeah. So now you're putting out a lot of fires, and
it was,
kind of thing.
Having one ear of just the grip gaffer team talking to me, and then having the other ear of like working with the talent, and the folks that we had there that was kind of running the stages. It was a lot. I mean, it wasn't by any means a disaster, but it was definitely a lot to juggle.
Well, and I'm sure that shooting rhythm that you're used to, kind of in the more documentary style where you're finding the shot, it could probably be, I could imagine it was maybe not difficult, but a solid gear change to try to do something scripted.
Yeah, and I think I was ready for it. I've shot a handful of things that required larger setups now, and so I was prepared for it. But the thing I think I didn't do was get everybody else on the same page, right? Like everyone was used to sort of shooting quick run and gun, and so being able to explain like, no, if we want this to look the way that we've all agreed that it should look, we need to spend X amount of time doing this, and sort of having to bring everyone's expectations to that level is all part of the communicating job of directing that I think should not be overlooked.
Yeah. A big part of this podcast that I like to do is figure out where non-film influences can influence someone.
Right.
And I'm wondering if there's anything that Adam's sort of singular process. He seems like he's kind of maybe not unique, but it's all his thing. He's developed the way that he does his shit.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if that methodology, or his methodology specifically, has informed any sort of filmmaking for you. Anything that you've kind of taken from that process.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because I've used his like get the cheapest tool
right.
until you know what you need, and then buy an expensive tool. I've given that advice to everyone who says like, what camera should I get? I'm like, just get the one you can afford until you know what you need. And I directly stole that from him.
That's a really good one. Yeah. Cause it is, you do, especially with us in the camera stuff, like we see the Ronin and like, I need that. That's what I need. But like, do you? And like, yeah, trying out some Steadicam or glide cam stuff first. Like there's definitely been aspects of that I've taken with me. That's a good one. Same with like the right tool for the right job. I mean, honestly, I think the biggest thing of being in such close quarters with him for so long is really understanding the power of good communication, like really understanding how how to articulate things in a way that gets your point across effectively. And like that's all part of him being on camera, and that's all, you know, part of his job for so long through Mythbusters. But I think I really starting to see the effects of that and how little time he could waste of other people being able to just come right out and articulate what is the goal here and what is being said and how to do it in a very nice way. Like he's exactly how you see on TV, like his personality. And it's I think there's a lot of things to take from that for me at least, but there's probably more stuff that'll come to me later.
Sure. For anyone listening, the conceit of this interview is that we're friends, so it's a little easier to just like sit here and talk for 3 fucking hours. And,
I know.
You know, but I'll try to keep it to the hour, like we promised. But the way I end all of these interviews is asking the same 2 questions. First one being, although I just kind of asked it, but what's a piece of advice that maybe you were given or you read somewhere or something that has kind of stuck with you through your filmmaking career?
Yeah, that's an interesting. Like I feel like I've gotten different pieces of advice that have helped me at different stages.
I'll take a couple. It doesn't have to just be one.
I think the one, and I was thinking about this recently, if there was a, you know, I'm getting close to late 30s now.
I loved the change. I'm almost
but I feel like I spent a long time in my 20s and early 30s, sort of a bit paralyzed in terms of self-generate. Like right now I'm in this like self-generation mode where I'm trying to like generate as much content myself to pursue the goals that I have. But I feel like there was a long time, especially when you start really consuming, when I started really getting into film, I started consuming a lot of film and having filmmakers influence me. I sort of started to understand my taste a little bit better and like understand things. And it almost became sort of paralyzed in going from shooting whatever short films with my friends to like not making anything for a long time. Cause like I couldn't think of anything what I would deem as like original enough and good enough. Right. And there was a few years ago, it's a guy, I want to say his name's Kirby Ferguson, but he came out with a video called Everything is a Remix, which I highly recommend.
I think I've seen that, but yeah.
Yeah. It's all about the idea that great artists, you know, they go through a process of like, I don't want to call it stealing, but like taking someone else's idea, sort of figuring out their own spin on it. And in that methodology, like in that process of doing that and then creating something that sort of imitates it, you tend to create something new or something original from that process. And I think if I would have given my younger self advice, it would just been, just make the stuff that like you're super into. Don't worry about being original. Just like I needed to spend time polishing my skills, honing, you know, getting these tools together. And like, I wish I would have shot, there were short stories that I've read. I was a big reader of like Ray Bradbury. Like, I wish I would have went back and like shot, like adapted things, shot things, not being paralyzed by having this original thought. And if I would have done so, I would have got a lot more skills quicker and not been so precious about making that original thing. So yeah, I think the big piece of advice I would have given myself is like, imitate more to get your voice, to come back around and get your original voice.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I've always said is like, if you're 2 things actually. One, I early on kind of started to think of myself as part of a lineage. Film is a relatively new medium. It's only 100 and some odd years old, you know? So if you think of like, maybe like a family tree, you know, I always think like, where do I sit on that family tree and how am I going to advance
Oh, interesting.
those people? You know, we're not related in any way, but like I think of certain filmmakers who influenced me and how am I going to take what I learned from them or what I like about them and meld it with. And this is the second thing. If you can steal from like 3 artists and put it into one project, that's your thing.
Right.
If you steal from one person, you're stealing. But if you add 3 things, it's your thing now.
I like that. That's a good formula.
Yeah. Because, you know, 2 even is like, I could, you know, because it's everyone always describes the film as like, oh, it's like Aliens meets Jaws, or I guess Alien is Jaws. But, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's always something meets something. But if you add a third thing, whole new thing. But yeah, the family tree thing is something I've always thought about, which, but also I think, tell me if this is kind of part of your thought process there, because it occurred to me as you were saying it. I think a lot of that paralysis can come from the idea of making something and have it not be good enough for you're already thinking about distribution when you haven't shot a single frame. It's like, you don't have to distribute it.
No,
you can just make it for you.
Or like feedback. Like I know that sort of messed with me a little bit as I started like working with folks, and like it probably happened subconsciously, at least, of early stages of like working with higher profile people like Adam or before Adam, or it's just like who are making really good television or movies or something. Like, oh, I'm never like, I don't want to make it and then look like amateur in their eyes, right? Like, and that's sort of a weird, something you should visit a therapist about, I guess. But like, there's a lot of like insecurities, I guess, that artists can have, and like going into that paralysis mode is not good.
Well, and I think honesty with oneself, or not only oneself, but like honesty. If you go up to someone and you're like, hey, like, this is a kind of a leap for me. I'm really excited to be here, but I'm just like being real up front. Like, I haven't done something at this level. I'm here to work and I'm here to learn. I think they appreciate that more than you bullshitting your way through the experience, and then they learn about it later,
That was going to be my
the
other advice I was kind of thinking about was that, I don't know who said it. I don't know if it was a family member, but when I first started getting into this, it was knocking on doors. Like the way I got involved with the music video guy here is basically cold calling production companies. Like, hey, like, here's my situation. Like, here, like, I'm a sponge for knowledge. And I understand that I don't have a whole lot of experience, but like, I want to show up and learn and do whatever I can. Like people who have been doing something for a while, like they kind of dig teaching somebody. They're like passing on their skills. And especially now, I'm at a point where I'm interviewing people for jobs in the last few years. Like, I've met folks like a few years back who are like coming out of college, and they have everything figured out. Like, they know, like, there's a put off, like when you meet someone who just doesn't have any sort of humble acknowledgement of their own skill level or experience, like, it's not super great. And so being able to, say what I'm looking for this, like being honest, but also having that desire and thirst for knowledge, I think can really open you up to a lot of new experiences and mentorships.
Yeah. It's that thing like when people say like, oh, if you want to be interesting, be interested, because people like to talk about themselves. It's kind of the same thing. Like, people like to teach. Yeah. That was a big thing when I was young. Here's some advice that has nothing to do with filmmaking for anyone listening. No one wants to be fixed.
Right.
No one. Yeah. Don't just start giving people advice about stuff. Don't fix people's problems. If someone comes to you and says like, oh man, I'm really struggling with this, don't immediately go like, well, what you should do,
what you need to do,
because they don't
this.
care. Yeah. They don't fucking care. They're going to find that, if they ask you, great, then they care. But other than that, just be a good shoulder,
It's funny. I'm really good with receiving feedback on projects and stuff, but there are some times when like I have something and someone gives me unsolicited feedback. I'm like, I didn't ask for that feedback. It's already published. Go away.
I saw this email going around there's this Twitter account called forexposure.txt, I think. And one of them was like, this guy was cold emailing. I think they were like YouTube accounts, but it was just a copy paste job. And it was like, I've watched your channel and it's great, but I know I can do better. Are you are you interested in this, that, and the other? And everyone was just like, buddy, that is not how you introduce yourself.
I had somebody,
you're bad.
That Beacon short film that we just talked about, the G4 thing, there was somebody who ripped it from YouTube, cut it in their way that they would make it better, and then posted it, and then came into the comments and said, hey, just for you guys to know, I thought this can be better if this, and that. I'm like, wow, what a ballsy move.
Oh, no. There is something to be said for, like, I'm sure that person was well-intentioned.
Right.
But that is kind of the downfall, or not the downfall, but like a downside to, I hate to say, like, the YouTube generation, which is the high knowledge, low experience person.
Yeah.
Doesn't doesn't quite know, because like meeting those people like on set, it's very apparent. They know every single speck of the camera, but couldn't, can't communicate well, or has lived on YouTube learning from. I was just talking about this. I'm gonna have to start not talking about this. It's like every podcast I talk about where I went to college and I had to stop. And this is another thing, is like talking about YouTube, because it's addictive. I'm on YouTube all the time.
Oh, yeah.
But it's like a lot of times it's amateurs teaching amateurs.
Yeah.
And it's, people want to become filmmakers, and it's like, well, are you watching movies? Like, do you have a Criterion streaming, thing, or are you watching, pick a YouTuber, a photographer teaching you how to make movies?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's something like, I mean, this is probably petty, but like whenever I hear a shooter refer to themselves as a director of photography, I'm like, well, like, are you just shooting like with your DSLR, or like, are you managing a crew, or like figuring out a day, or like understand, like there's a difference there.
I don't think it's petty at all, because a lot of DPs have talked about that, and it really is. It's kind of, that's like a micro level of this macro problem, which is education is so accessible that I think people can get the false sense of, I've put the time in.
Right. I sat there and watched all these. I'm ready.
Yeah. Or I read all the books, or whatever it is. Yeah. And while you may be knowledgeable, you still need, it's kind of what I was talking sort of off stream about, the person on the snowboard, where they hadn't gone through the 10 years of experience that I had. They just started talking to me like they knew shit. And I'm like, okay, but like, I think film is one of those things where it's like, you do have to pay your dues. Just because you know a lot doesn't mean you're the DP or whatever. Like, even I get kind of, the further away I get from doing, these past couple of years, I haven't really been able to shoot anything. So it's like, the further away I get from the last project I did, the more and more concerned I am about saying I'm like a DP.
Oh yeah.
Or a cinematographer or whatever.
I was just having a existential crisis a couple of days ago. Like, I haven't touched a camera in like a couple of months now. Like, oh geez, who am I?
Yeah. Well, next time you're in LA, we'll have to come up with a project and just shoot it.
That's interesting. You brought up I feel like that's what caused me to go knock on doors when I did, is because in 2004, 2005, like Final Cut, everyone was editors. Final Cut came out. It was kind of new. Everyone was editors, mini DV, everyone was shooters. And then there was material that you can consume online that taught you everything. And it was like, how do I get out of this pool of people? Like, I can sit here and learn everything on my computer and be part of this, but like the advantage I need to give myself is I need to go out and like actually talk to people and like knock on doors, put my time in with these folks as like production assistant or interning. And so like there was a big realization where I was like, if I just keep sitting here learning, I'm gonna be just like a million of these other people in Los Angeles who are all learning at the same time online.
So anyway, that was the first question. Trying to wrap this up. Second question, much easier. Suggest a movie for people to watch that traditionally I say isn't yours, but
out of all of the movies, out of all time,
you can make a couple if you'd like. Dude, the question, I've said this a few times, but the question used to be, what's your favorite film? And I've learned that's a way worse question.
Oh, geez, yeah, that one's tough. It's tough to attach yourself to like your taste to one specific film.
One thing I'm starting to do actually is with people who've shot features. I'm going to start asking your movies in a double feature. What's the movie that comes before yours?
Oh, that's a good one. I like that.
Because I think that'll narrow it. It's easier to answer.
I think a lot. Like whenever I watch movies, I'm always thinking like, "Ooh, that'd be a good double feature with this other movie I just saw."
I do too.
That's funny.
What sucks is my girlfriend doesn't want to watch two movies back to back. She barely wants to watch one movie. Who else am I going to show this to?
I would think it's in those terms. I'm going to do two movies. I had one, but now you made me think of another one.
Okay, cool.
This one I saw in a theater. It came out in like the 90s. It's an anime called Perfect Blue. Have you heard of this?
Okay. No.
So it's a very adult. I mean, in terms of it is a movie. It is like a straight. It's not like an anime. It is a movie about
like Akira or whatever.
Yeah, it's about a singer, a female singer who goes off, who is in this big pop band, leaves to do like an acting career, ends up involved with some stalker, and sort of her mental stability starts to sort of deteriorate. It is a wonderfully made movie. It looks amazing. The storytelling is super good. Like the soundtrack's awesome. But if you want to see where like 70% of Darren Aronofsky's sort of pool is from, watch this movie, because it's very. You'll see a lot of Black Swan in this movie. You'll see a lot of like Requiem for a Dream. It's sort of all that weird mind fuckery that Darren Aronofsky loves to delve into. Is sort of this is probably one of his biggest influences, and it's such a cool movie. I love some of his movies. I'm hit or miss, but like Black Swan is one of my favorites of his.
Sure.
And Perfect Blue. Once I saw that, I'm like, this is right up there with it. I think it's a fantastic movie. Again, like I don't know where you can find it on streaming, or it came out like late 90s. The other movie I'm gonna go recent. I saw this movie called 9 Days. Have you seen this one?
9 Days. No, I've seen 6 Day.
9 Days it's a newer movie about I don't know how to explain it without giving. I guess there's not a whole lot to give away. It's a very like one location sort of sci-fi-ish concept about a guy who's sort of deciding who is going to go live life. So it's a sort of another weird mindfuckery movie, but it's a guy whose job is to interview these candidates throughout this 9-day process of who will then go off and like live a life. Like, I guess be born. Like they're not clear on like the logistics of it, but essentially it is some pre-life space that these people are in. I think it's sort of like Zazie Beetz, a few other folks I can't remember the name of.
Oh, she's cool.
Yeah, she's one of the main candidates. It's one of those movies that I love, like big actiony movies, big pop movies, but it is one of those indie movies that just like kind of rocked me. It sort of investigates like the meaning of life and existence, and it's super super cool. I don't think it's terribly long either. It's like an hour and 45 minutes or so. But it's one of those movies I feel like it's going to go under a lot of people's radars in terms of a lot of indie movies that come out. But
sure.
Yeah.
Those are great. Yeah, I'll have to check both. I've recently, honestly, a lot of these suggestions that I get from DPs, I end up just throwing it on an Amazon list. And like, if it's on Blu-ray, it's pretty much in my arms. Like by the time the episode goes out. I've been buying so many Blu-rays recently. Like,
really?
I've just suddenly, I might've been the pandemic, but physical media has just become like an obsession of mine, especially because like, movies get edited before they hit streaming. It's different than you remember it or whatever, Disney, famously has like been editing shows out from under people. Like you watch it and then the next day you come back and you try to watch it again and you're like, wait a second, where's that thing? And they changed it, Spider-Man Far From Home got edited while it was in theaters. There's like two sections. There's the section with Green Goblin where he's talking to his helmet, and the section where Tobey Maguire comes through the portal. Right. Both got re-edited after release and then pushed to all the theaters.
Wow.
So depending on when you saw it, slightly different film than everyone else.
That's interesting. Yeah. And also, I guess if you haven't seen it, I don't know if it's spoilers or not.
It's the biggest. It's about to beat Avatar. Yeah. If you haven't seen it, that's on you.
It's an amazing movie. I loved that movie.
Dude, I assume you saw The Matrix.
I did, yeah.
So let's talk about a double feature. I saw The Matrix, and then the next day saw Spider-Man.
Oh. And
the commentary on nostalgia before watching Spider-Man was jarring.
Huh.
Yeah, because I went into Matrix not like I specifically didn't read anything about it. I barely watched any trailers. Like I just wanted to go because The Matrix, like for me, is one of the films that got me into filmmaking. And to have the filmmaker basically go like, I know why you're here to watch this, and I don't like you.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, well, this message clearly is for me. And it's something that I talk about all the time. I'm always like, I don't want any more remakes. I don't want any more sequels. Like, I want more original content. And then there I am in Matrix 4, like, yay, Neo.
Yeah.
And having that sort of dichotomy thrown in my face. And I just went like, oh, I have to kind of reevaluate my creative brain in that way. And then I turn around and watch Spider-Man, and it's just the nostalgia train from hell. Like,
yep. Spider-Man was interesting because I mean,
great film. I loved it, but yeah.
Yeah. But it's also like the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man is like when superhero movies were starting to become good.
That and X-Men were like the
and
only
X-Men,
two
yeah.
good ones.
And Tobey Maguire, those first two movies are so good, and I was so hard on all of them for the third movie. I did not like it. I blamed all of them. I didn't like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man anymore, and I was so hard on him. And when he walked through the portal, I was explaining this to Norm. It was as if you had a really bad falling out with a friend 20 years ago, and then you see him again for the first time, and like you forget everything, just give him a hug. Like,
Yeah.
I just wanted to like give Tobey Maguire a hug, like, oh, I missed you. You did so much for me.
Yeah. And honestly, I did kind of like how they handled Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man, where it was a little more than subtle when they were like,
Yeah.
no one fucking likes, like when he was like, yeah, I guess I'm the third Spider-Man, whatever.
He's
Why
like
am I
the
number 3?
annoying middle sibling. Yeah.
Yeah. They're just ribbing him so hard, and I was like, that's nice. But yeah, I guess we should probably wrap. I'm sure you have a life to get to, but
Yeah.
but thanks for doing the podcast, man. We'll have
No, it's super fun to just spend a couple hours talking shop or talking hours. So.
I'll let you go, and I'll see you next month or so.
All right, cool. There you can.
Yeah, later, bud.
Frame and Reference is an Owlbot production. It's produced and edited by me, Kenny McMillan, and distributed by Pro Video Coalition. Our theme song is written and performed by Mark Pelly, and the F@R Matbox logo was designed by Nate Truax of Truax Branding Company. You can read or watch the podcast you've just heard by going to provideocoalition.com or youtube.com/owlbot, respectively. And as always, thanks for listening.